Captain Elena Vasquez clamped her hands on the armrests of her command chair as the bridge alarm shrieked, red strobe slashing across the tense faces of her crew.
"Status!"
she snapped, her voice slicing through the din like a blade. Lieutenant Raj Patel swiped furiously at his console, tactical feeds blooming in urgent overlays across the displays. Multiple contacts inbound, Captain. Krell Vanguard, 3 cruisers on Vector 047. They're arming weapons. Ensign Mia Torres glanced up from her comm station, her fingers poised over the panel. Incoming transmission from their flagship. It's an offer. Ceasefire negotiations. Vasquez leaned forward, her eyes sharpening to points. The Krell, those tentacled scourges from the Orion arm, had been hammering humanity for months, their bioengineered fleets ripping through colony defenses like tissue paper. Now this? She shot a quick glance at Patel, who shook his head subtly, caution etched deep into his features. No obvious traps exposed yet. Patch it through, Ensign. Audio only. The speakers crackled to life and a synthetic voice slithered out, laced with unnatural harmonics that prickled the skin along Vasquez's neck. UNS Vanguard, this is Ambassador Thulk of the Krell Concordance. We propose an immediate cessation of hostilities, a summit on neutral ground, and this wasteful conflict. Wasteful. Vasquez's jaw locked tight. Wasteful after they'd scorched New Sydney to glass and buried Europa under ice and ruin. Her crew held their collective breath, the low thrum of the engines underscoring the blaring alerts. Patel mouthed the word stall, but she waved him silent with a sharp gesture. Hesitation here would invite slaughter. Ambassador, she fired back, her voice ironclad and unyielding. Your proposal is noted, but we don't bargain from our knees. Transmit coordinates for this summit, or your Vanguard scatters as scrap. Torres relayed the message without flinching, though her eyes had widened a fraction. Silence gripped the bridge then, the proximity beeps accelerating into a frantic rhythm. Seconds clawed into what felt like forever. The reply came swiftly. Coordinates appended. Approach cautiously, Captain. Extinction binds us both. Vasquez severed the link, her thoughts churning like the engines below. The Krell held all the edges. Superior numbers, morphing adaptive tech that shifted mid-battle. Humans countered with raw endurance, the kind hammered out in the forge of relentless loss. Helm set an intercept course, weapons primed and hot. Patel lock on their lead cruiser. If this trap springs, we strike first and hard. The engines roared to full power. The ship surged forward, the stars beyond the viewport smearing into elongated streaks of light. Torres turned in her seat, her voice hushed but urgent. Captain, do you really trust they'll hold to it? Vasquez's smile cut grim across her face. Trust? They lack the very concept. But they'll taste ours. Fire forged if required. The Vanguard hurtled toward the designated mark, and as they closed, one Krell cruiser veered away from the formation, its surrender codes pulsing out in a steady stream. Vasquez tracked the tactical display, her pulse steady and measured. This wasn't peace, it was the opening move in a game played in shadows. Patel edged closer to her chair. If it's genuine, a real chance at endgame? She locked eyes with him, resolute. We seize it, but on our rules. No mercy for the graves they've filled. The crew nodded as one, their jaws set firm. The ceasefire dangled before them like a thread-thin lifeline laced with toxin. Vasquez would yank it hard and see what weave unraveled. The Krell cruiser drifted in the void like a gutted beast, its hull gashed and scarred from recent clashes, engines sputtering in erratic fits of plasma. Vasquez gripped the arms of her chair tightly, her gaze fixed on the main viewport as the Vanguard closed the distance. No weapons locks pinged on their sensors, no aggressive thrusts, just that looping surrender signal, a white flag in the universal tongue of the stars. Full scan, she commanded, her voice piercing the steady hum of the bridge. I want to know if that's a ship or a snare wrapped in codes. Torres's hands blurred over her panels, the soft glow etching lines of concentration into her frown. Aye, Captain. Power output minimal across the board. Life signs erratic but present, clustered in the forward sections. About 200 Krell aboard. All weapon systems dormant. Patel crossed his arms over his chest, skepticism carving deep lines into his face. Classic decoy play. Draw us in close, then their main fleet jumps out of hyperspace for the ambush. We've seen that tactic before. Vasquez nodded curtly, her mind flashing through a dozen contingencies in rapid succession. The war had bled on for years, reducing human colonies to cinders and billions to the cold void. A ceasefire? It reeked of desperation or deceit, yet if even a sliver of it was genuine, it meant time to regroup, to mount a counterpunch that could turn the tide. Hail them! Audio only. Let's hear what their surrender sounds like. The comms linked up and guttural tones filtered through the ship's AI translator, rendering them into stumbling English. Vanguard, this is Commander Varric of the Krell Harmony. We yield. Our fleet withdraws. Coordinates for neutral exchange provided. No harm. Peace. Static weighted the air heavily after the words. Vasquez's jaw clenched. Peace after the glassing of Europa and the bioplagues unleashed on Mars outposts? Her crew mirrored her doubt. Torres's eyes narrowed to slits. Patel's hand hovered near the alert klaxon. Neutral exchange? She probed, keeping her tone level and probing. What exactly are you offering, Varric? Coordinates alone ring hollow. You have bodies to answer for. Are dead. The pause dragged on as the cruiser swelled larger on the screen, their velocities sinking smoothly. The response came lagged and burdened. Reparations, technology maps of our worlds. In exchange for safe passage of this vessel. The fleet upholds the ceasefire, Torres whispered under her breath. Reparations? After they turned half our solar system into graveyards? Vasquez silenced the bridge with a raised hand. Trust was a scarce commodity they couldn't afford to squander. But maps of Krell vulnerabilities, strongholds and supply lines laid bare, could shift the entire war. Helm, maintain distance at 5 clicks, no closer without clear scans for jump signatures. She turned to Patel. Prep the boarding teams. If we dock, it's on our terms, stunners only, sealed suits all around. Zero gambles. As the teams mobilized below decks, a new alert pinged from the sensors. Torres straightened in her seat. Captain, transmission from the main Krell fleet. They're confirming the ceasefire, broadcasting withdrawal vectors now. Vasquez eyed the tactical overlay. Dozens of enemy signatures peeling away toward the outer rims of the system. It looked convincing, yet her gut nodded with unease. Too slick, too sudden. Keep running shadow scans. Anything off note and we ignite them all. The boarding shuttle detached from the Vanguard with a subtle jolt, ferrying Vasquez, Patel, and a squad of Marines clad in reinforced vac suits. The Krell cruiser's docking port gaped open like an empty maw, emergency lights pulsing faintly along the scarred hull. No welcoming party in sight. Stay sharp, Patel hissed over the squad channel as they cycled through the airlock. Xenos don't surrender without strings attached. Always. The corridors beyond twisted into a maze of alien architecture, walls veined with bioluminescent conduits that flickered feebly. Slumped Krell bodies lay in alcoves along the way, their chitinous forms still in tendrils slack. The air recyclers whispered a faint metallic bite into the atmosphere. Varric loomed in the command chamber ahead, a towering figure with faceted eyes and battle-scarred armored plates. Flanked by 2 subordinates, it dipped its head in a gesture the translators flagged as deference. Captain Elena, welcome. We speak terms. Vasquez advanced steadily, her blaster holstered but primed at her hip, Patel shadowing her closely. Truth first, Varric. Why yield now? Your fleet was dominating the field. What cracked you open? The Krell's mandibles clicked rapidly, the voice modulator straining to keep pace. Fracture within our ranks. High command splits. The advance, unholdable. Losses pile high. Ceasefire saves what remnants we have. Patel snorted low under his breath. Unholdable? Try asking the shades on Titan about that. Varric's gaze shifted, opaque and unreadable. It gestured to a holographic table that ignited to life, spilling out star charts, Krell strongholds and supply lines laid bare in vulnerable detail. This we yield. In exchange for passage. No chase, no pursuit. Vasquez traced the display with her eyes. A central hub world exposed, flanks undefended and ripe for strikes. It was treasure, if true. Her gloved hand neared the interface to download the data. But then the deck thrummed beneath her feet, rhythmic beyond any failing engine stutter. Torres, she keyed her comm, keeping her voice hushed. Status on the Vanguard. Captain, micro-jumps flickering on long-range sensors. Not the main fleet, smaller signatures, scouts maybe. The chamber lights flared suddenly. Varric's subordinates tensed, their claws twitching. Alarms howled from hidden speakers. Vasquez's hand snapped to her blaster. Ambush? Varric reared back, its voice thundering through the modulator. Betrayal, rogues, not ours. The deck heaved violently, an explosion booming through the hull, bulkheads creaking in protest. Patel hauled Vasquez toward the exit. To the shuttle, move. The Marines fanned out, their stunners whining into action. Vasquez bolted down the corridors, Patel's hold on her arm vice-tight amid the ongoing shudders. Sparks rained from overhead panels, the scorch of melting circuits stinging her lungs through the suit filters. Behind them, the whine of stunners clashed against guttural snarls. Varric's guards locked in combat with the intruders.
"Marines, hold the line,"
she ordered into her comm, vaulting over a fallen beam that half sealed the path ahead. Her boots slid on the heated deck plating. Torres's voice crackled back, taut with strain. "Captain, breach at the ventral airlock. Not Varric's people. These are rogue Krell light armor armed with plasma lances. They're bypassing security protocols." Rogue Krell. The words landed like a blow to the gut, a splinter faction of killers notorious for hit-and-run butchers on the fringe worlds. If they were here, the ceasefire had been bait all along. The hub world a trap designed to eviscerate the talks and gut human diplomacy. Patel booted open a side hatch, thrusting Vasquez into a narrower service tunnel. Dim emergency strips glowed to life, casting shadows that leaped with their hurried steps. Shuttle bay's 2 levels up. Elevators are dead. Ladders our best bet. She nodded sharply, holstering her blaster to scale the grated rungs ahead. Her muscles screamed from the strain, but adrenaline honed every sense. The distant rumbles of weapons fire, the faint ozone scent of charging energy shields. Varric's roars echoed faintly over the comm. "This shatters all. We halt it now." But trust was splintering swifter than the hull. Mid-climb, the ladder quaked violently. A plasma bolt seared past, melting a rung inches from Patel's grip. He swore sharply, swinging his rifle one-handed down the shaft to return fire. "They're on us!" "Elena, climb!" She crested the lip and dropped into a crouch as more shots lit the tunnel like erratic fireworks. 2 rogue Krell warriors, hulking figures in jagged exosuits, their mandibled faces twisted in snarls, pushed forward from a junction ahead. One raised its lance, the barrel glowing red-hot. Vasquez rolled behind a stack of conduits, drawing her blaster in a fluid motion. She fired twice, the shots glancing off their shields in bursts of ionized air. "Patel, cover me!" He vaulted up beside her, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. The first rogue staggered, its shield sputtering under the onslaught. The second lunged with a vibro claw extended. Vasquez sidestepped, slamming her elbow into the joint, human leverage against alien mass. The claw whirred past her shoulder, shearing a chunk from the wall. "Twist it!" Patel yelled, his next shot breaching the weakened shield. The rogue wailed, crumpling into a heap of twitching limbs. Vasquez panted, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her glove. The air hummed with the aftershock of the discharge, her ears tolling. How many more? Scans show a dozen plus breaching the core. Varric's forces are pinned. They're fighting back, but these rogues came prepped. Torres again, her tone edged with urgency. "Shuttle's ready, but the bay doors are jammed. Need you to reroute power from auxiliary." Vasquez eyed Patel as he pried open an access panel, wires spilling out like exposed nerves. "Send schematics." Her HUD flooded with blinking red lines marking failed relays. She danced her fingers over the junctions. A spark jumped, singeing her glove, but the power flow steadied. A distant blast tilted the deck slightly, the gravity compensators straining. "Power routed," she confirmed, slamming the panel shut. "Torres, force those doors." "Affirmative. But Captain, long range shows a rogue carrier inbound. ETA 5 minutes. Evac now or never." Patel's face set hard in the dim light. Varric's still bound for the chamber. "If we leave him..." Their eyes met, the weight of command settling like lead. Varric had staked his clan's prestige on this fragile peace. Humans didn't abandon allies to die, not when mutual dooms loomed on the horizon. "We extract him. Torres, sync with Varric's guard. Rally point at the shuttle." The comm buzzed with affirmation, but doubt gnawed at her edges. The hub world spun vulnerable below, its flanks turning from gold opportunity to poison. If the rogues seized it, the ceasefire crumbled to dust, and humanity's demand, total Krell disarmament or perish, would echo as a knell in the void. Blasters raised, they moved out into the tunnels, swallowing shadows. Another shudder rippled through the ship, a stark reminder that time was hemorrhaging away. Vasquez seized the shuttle's railing as it lurched forward through the tunnel, the dim emergency lights guttering like expiring suns. Torres flanked her to the left, rifle slung low but ready. Varric's guard, a lean Krell named Lear, crouched to her right, his faceted eyes scouring the shadows. His claws ticked against the metal deck, mirroring the thudding of her pulse. Structural integrity at 60%, Torres reported, her voice steady over the internal comm. That last hit from the rogue cruiser cracked the outer hull. We're venting atmosphere in Sector 3. Vasquez nodded, the metallic tang of recycled air sharp on her tongue. The hub's diplomatic station was built for talks, not as a bastion against siege. Now, with the ceasefire's thread frayed to breaking, the rogue fleet had twisted it into a deadly trap. Varric's plea for extraction wasn't just politics. It was raw survival. His fall would doom any chance of humans dictating terms, disarm or die. Keep the formation tight, she ordered, her boot magnetizing to the deck amid the fluctuating gravity. Lear, your people said these service tunnels linked to the ambassador's quarters. Any surprises we should know about? Lear's mandibles worked in a gesture that signaled unease. Rogue loyalists control the upper levels. They hunt Varric as a traitor. But the tunnels, they are old, shaky and unstable. The shuttle groaned again, a deep vibration rattling her teeth. Torres cursed under her breath, patching into the station's schematics on her wrist display. Boss, we've got movement ahead. Heat signatures 3, no 5. Armed and closing. Vasquez raised her blaster, its familiar weight anchoring her in the moment. The plan was bare bones. Reach Varric, extract him to the human shuttle docked at the far arm, and burst out before the blockade clamped down. But simplicity was a lie in the theater of war. Flank formation. Torres, cover high. Lear, take point on the turns. They breached the tunnel's junction, the air growing thick with the acrid scent of ozone from fried conduits. Lear darted ahead around the bend, then reappeared with a sharp whistle. Clear for now. Vasquez pushed forward, her mind whirling through contingencies. The human proposal had been bold. Full disarmament for the Krell Empire or face the crush of humanity's unified fleets. Varric's clan had endorsed it, glimpsing the cracks in their expansionist dreams after decades of overreach. But not all agreed. A plasma bolt sizzled past her shoulder, grazing the wall inches from her ear and charring the air.
Contact.
Torres yelled, dropping to one knee and returning fire. The tunnel erupted in flashes of light. Rogue enforcers, their chitinous armor gleaming under the strobing emergency lights, advancing from a side vent. Vasquez rolled behind a bulkhead, her pulse thundering in her ears.
Lear, fall back.
Torres, suppressive fire. Lear obeyed, his pulse rifle chattering in blue bursts, but the enforcers pressed relentlessly, their numbers surging as reinforcements poured in. One bolt nicked Torres's arm, sending her sprawling with a grunt. Blood welled dark through her sleeve. Man down, Vasquez barked, dragging her to cover. The wound wasn't fatal, but it was a pace killer. The tunnel quaked violently now, debris cascading from the ceiling as another orbital strike hammered the station. Minutes until the whole structure buckled. Lear fired again, his shots precise but outnumbered. They have sealed the forward path. We must reroute. Through the maintenance shafts. Vasquez tore a strip from her jacket, binding Torres's arm with quick, efficient knots. Can we make it to Varric's quarters?
2 levels up.
Torres winced but met her eyes, her wit surfacing even through the pain. If crawling through vents doesn't appeal, sure. Just spare the ambassador the scent of our sweat and regret. A ghost of a smile tugged at Vasquez's lips. On your feet. Lear leads. But as they moved, doubt clawed at her. Human grit had carried them this far, allying with a fractured Krell faction against the Empire's warmongers. Yet extracting one ambassador wouldn't win the war. It was a spark, a defiant no to extinction. The maintenance shaft gaped before them, a narrow crawl space laced with sparking wires. Lear squeezed in first, his voice muffled. Hurry, the enforcers will breach soon. Vasquez aided Torres inside, the confined space pressing like a vice. Sweat stung her eyes as she followed. Blaster holstered but her fingers itching for it. Behind them, the tunnel echoed with the relentless click of approaching claws. Deeper in, the shaft narrowed further, forcing a belly crawl. Torres breathed heavily ahead, her injured arm scraping the sides. This ingenuity of yours better pay off, Cap. Feels like we're tunneling to our own grave. Quiet, Vasquez whispered, though his words echoed her own fears. A sudden jolt rocked the station, and the section of shaft ahead crumpled inward, sealing their path with twisted metal. Panic surged. They were trapped, enemies closing in. Lear reversed course, his eyes wide. Blocked. The strike had collapsed the route. Vasquez eyed the wreckage, her mind whirring. Humans hadn't survived this long by following maps to the letter. She pulled a plasma cutter from her kit, the tool meant for hull breaches but adaptable in a pinch. Torres, brace yourself. Lear, cover the rear. Sparks flew as she sliced into the debris, the heat intense in the tight confines. Minutes stretched like hours, the cutter whining against the reinforced plating. Distant alarms blared the station's death throes. Finally, a gap widened, just barely enough. They wriggled through the jagged opening. Vasquez first, her shoulders scraping against the molten edges. The air beyond was thicker, laced with the acrid tang of burning circuits, but the path sloped downward, away from the blaring alarms. Torres twisted his bulk to clear the hole, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle slung across his back. Lear brought up the rear, his elongated limbs making the maneuver look effortless despite the fear etched on his scaled face. Keep moving, Vasquez rasped, her voice low over the groan of settling metal. Seconds counted now. She didn't dare glance back. The core breach had triggered cascading failures, bulkheads folding like paper, life support flickering out section by section. And worse, Krell patrols would be vectoring in, their scanners sniffing out the heat signature from her cutter like a beacon. Torres grunted as he cleared the gap fully, wiping sweat from his brow. That was too close. If they pin us here, they won't. Vasquez cut him off, her eyes scanning the dim corridor ahead. Emergency lights pulsed red, casting long shadows that danced like specters. She spotted a junction, left toward engineering, right toward the outer docks. Engineering might offer shuttle bay access, but it was a straight shot for any hunter squads. Docks meant exposure, but also a shot at escape velocity if they could reach a pod. Lear's breath came in sharp hisses, his claws clicking against the grated floor. The vibrations? More collapses incoming. We cannot linger. She nodded, deciding in an instant. Docks it is.
Torres, take point.
Lear, you're on sensors. Call any Krell signatures. The corridor narrowed into a service tunnel lined with exposed conduits. Sparks showered from a ruptured line overhead, forcing Torres to duck. He fired a quick burst from his sidearm at the sparking panel, silencing the noise before it could draw attention. Clear for now, he muttered. Built like a tank and cautious to a fault, his steady aim had saved them twice already in this nightmare. Vasquez felt the weight of the plasma cutter in her pack, its battery nearly drained. Improvising had carried them this far. Wars weren't won by playing by alien rules. The Krell's ceasefire broadcast had come with all the pomp and protocol from their fleet command just hours ago. Surrender or perish, they demanded, as if humanity would kneel after the colonies fell. Vasquez's response, patched through the station's comms before the fighting turned hand to hand, had been simple. Coordinates for their extinction vector. No negotiations, just payback. A low rumble built underfoot, vibrating through her boots. Lear froze, tilting his head as he interfaced with a nearby access port via a jury-rigged translator gauntlet. Patrol, 3 Krell, 200 meters aft. Armored, closing fast. Torres spun, rifle up. We hold here? No. Vasquez's mind raced. The tunnel forked ahead, but the right branch was a dead end. Maintenance log she'd memorized en route confirmed it. Left it was, into the unknown. But holding meant a fight in a choke point, and they were low on ammo. Flank and run. Lear, any vents or side passages? His eyes flickered with streaming data. One, above narrow. Human fit, maybe. She glanced up, a grate barely visible in the gloom leading into ducting, tight but viable. Torres, boost me up. Lear, next, angle your build right. Torres knelt without a word, cupping his hands. Vasquez stepped up, leveraging into the duct with a grunt. It was a squeeze, the metal biting into her ribs, but she wriggled forward, the darkness swallowing her whole. Behind, she heard the scrape of Lear's scales, then Torres's heavier efforts. Go, go! She whispered fiercely. The duct sloped sharply, dumping them into a cavernous chamber. The auxiliary docking arm, half flooded with coolant from a breached line. Pods bobbed in the shallow blue tide, their emergency hatches blinking forlornly. But the far bulkhead was a mangled wreck. Krell boarding torpedoes had torn through here earlier, leaving fields of debris and flickering holograms of the battle raging outside. Pods are intact, Torres said, splashing forward to check one. But the clamps, they're jammed. Lear waded in, his water-resistant hide unbothered by the chill. External locks engaged remotely. The station AI is fragmenting. It may release on override. Vasquez sloshed to a console, her fingers flying over the interface. Alarms wailed anew. Guttural Krell voices echoing through the comms demanding surrender. She ignored them, hacking the protocol with a brute force code she'd lifted from a captured drone. The screen glitched, then stabilized. Got it. Clamps releasing in 30. A blast shook the chamber. The duct grate behind them erupted in a hail of shrapnel as Krell fire chewed through. Torres returned fire, his shots pinging off their energy shields. "They're here, cover!" Lear dove behind a pod, his scavenged Krell pulse rifle humming to life. Vasquez slammed the override, the pod's hatch hissing open. "In now!" Torres laid down suppressing fire, brave and unyielding, until a lucky shot grazed his arm. He cursed but kept shooting, buying them precious seconds. Lear piled in first, then Vasquez, hauling Torres aboard as the pod lurched free. Coolant sprayed wildly, the chamber flooding fully now. The pod rocketed out into the void, station debris tumbling past the viewport. Alarms inside blared, hull integrity at 60% from the hasty launch. Vasquez strapped in, glancing at Torres, who was binding his wound with a med strip. Lear stared at the stars, his expression veiled. "We made it," she said, the words tasting like fragile victory. The pod bucked as it cleared the station's debris field, its engines whining against the strain of the emergency burn. Vasquez wiped sweat from her brow, her fingers leaving a streak of grime across her skin. "Hull at 58%, she muttered, punching commands into the flickering console. The stars outside twisted into streaks, the void swallowing their desperate flight. Torres grunted, tying off the med strip on his arm. Blood seeped through anyway, but he ignored it, leaning forward to scan the nav display. "We're blind here. Sensors are fried from the coolant breach. Any sign of pursuit?" Lear crouched by the rear bulkhead, his elongated fingers tracing the pod's inner seams. His scales gleamed faintly under the emergency lights, a reminder of the worlds he'd crossed to fight beside them. "No immediate contacts," he said, his voice steady but edged with caution. "But the Krell will track us. Their hunters are relentless." Vasquez nodded, her mind racing through slim options. The pod was a relic, jury-rigged for evac, not evasion. Fuel reserves ticked down too fast. 30 minutes at this velocity, then they'd be drifting targets. She pulled up a star chart, the holographic projection sputtering to life. "Nearest friendly outpost is Vega Relay, but that's 3 jumps away. We push for it, or we risk a slingshot around that gas giant to shake any tails." Torres flexed his injured arm, wincing but forcing a grin. "Slingshot it is. I've danced with worse odds in Sims. Lear, you good to handle auxiliary thrusters if we need a nudge?" The alien's eyes narrowed, assessing the human's bravado. He'd seen Torres charge into fire without flinching, but wounds like that sapped even the toughest. "I can manage." But the pod's integrity, a sharp klaxon cut him off. The console lit up red. Incoming transmission encrypted on Krell frequencies. Vasquez slammed the accept button, her pulse quickening. The viewport filled with a holographic form. A Krell commander, its armored form looming large, mandibles clicking in what passed for speech. "Human vessel," it rasped through the translator, voice like grinding stone. "You flee without honor. The fleet offers parley. Ease your resistance. Join the Concordance or face annihilation." Torres barked a laugh, but it came out strained. "Parley? After they glassed half our colonies? Tell your boss we're fresh out of surrender." Vasquez held up a hand, silencing him. She leaned into the pickup, her eyes hard. "What's your offer, then?" "Because from where I'm sitting, your ceasefire smells like a trap." The Krell's image flickered, its sensors no doubt probing their weakening shields. "Surrender your weapons, integrate. Your ingenuity serves the greater whole. Refuse and we end this chase now." Lear shifted uneasily, his tail flicking against the deck. He'd defected for this, human's unyielding spirit against the Krell's crush. But the pod's alarms wailed again, proximity alert. Fighters closing fast. "They're locking weapons," Lear warned, already at the manual controls. Vasquez gripped the armrests, her decision crystallizing. "No deal. Torres, reroute power to forward deflectors." "Lear, prep the decoy flares, we're going evasive." The pod bucked as the first plasma bolt grazed their flank, hull integrity dropping to 42%. Torres slammed the reroute, sparks flying from the panel. "Deflectors hot. But they're gaining 2 minutes to intercept." She yanked the stick, diving the pod toward the gas giant's swirling atmosphere. Jupiter-like storms roiled below, bands of ammonia clouds hiding lightning-laced depths. The plan was mad. Skim the upper layers, use the turbulence to mask their signature. One wrong vector and they'd burn up. Coming up on the edge, Vasquez called, sweat beading on her neck. The viewport filled with the planet's ochre haze, wind shear buffeting them like a giant fist. Lear fired the flares, dummy pods ejecting in a burst, drawing the Krell fire. Explosions bloomed in the rear sensors, buying seconds, but a fighter broke through, its beam lancing close, shearing off a stabilizer fin. Torres cursed, hauling on his restraints as the pod spun wildly. "We're losing attitude control. Lear, compensate now." The alien braced against the console, claws flying over the thrusters. His calculations were precise, born of a lifetime navigating Krell blockades. But humans pushed limits he hadn't imagined. The pod stabilized just enough, plunging into the cloud layer. Visibility zeroed out, sensors screaming overload. Vasquez flew blind, trusting the inertial dampers and her gut. "Hold tight. If we survive this, we hit that relay and call in the cavalry." A final jolt rocked them. Another near miss or debris. Then silence, broken only by the hum of straining engines. The clouds parted, spitting them out into clear space, the gas giant shrinking behind. Torres slumped back, his breath ragged. "Did we lose them?" Lear checked the scopes, his face a mask of relief. "For now. But fuel's critical. Vega's our only shot." Vasquez allowed herself a tight smile, plotting the course. The Krell's offer hung unspoken. A ceasefire on their terms meant chains. Humans didn't bend. They broke worlds first. They pushed on, the stars their defiant map. Vasquez gripped the controls as Vega's orbit loomed ahead, the battered station orbiting the system's dim star like a forgotten relic. The fuel docks hung dark in the void, emergency lights flickering. Too quiet for a hub that should buzz with merchant traffic. "Scans show minimal life signs," Lear reported from the sensor station, his scaled fingers dancing over the console. "Krell patrols hit here 2 cycles back. Survivors holed up in the core modules." Torres leaned forward, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cabin's chill. "Great, we need that fuel or we're dead in the water." "Any sign of traps?" Vasquez banked the pod toward the nearest docking arm, thrusters firing in short bursts. "Assume yes." Lear pinged for auth codes. "Torres, suit up. We're going manual if the autodock glitches." The docking clamps engaged with a metallic groan, but the airlock seal held only seconds before hissing alarms blared. Atmosphere leaked somewhere deep in the station's guts, pulling at their pod like a desperate breath. They cycled through, mag boots clanging on grated floors slick with frost. Vasquez led, pulse rifle raised, her breath fogging the visor. Torres covered the rear, his steps deliberate and cautious. Lear's bioluminescent markings pulsed faintly in the low light. A reluctant ally who'd defected from Krell ranks after seeing their ceasefire for the lie it was. The corridor ended at a bulkhead scorched and buckled. Beyond, faint voices echoed, human, ragged, and urgent. "Captain Vasquez?" A woman's voice crackled over the comms as they breached the door. She stepped from the shadows, gaunt but steady, a makeshift bandage on her arm. "I'm Hale, station chief. You the relief from the core worlds?" "No relief," Vasquez said, lowering her weapon a fraction. "Just passing through. Fuel bays intact." Hale's eyes narrowed, scanning their suits. "Partially. Krell torched the outer tanks, but we've got reserves in the engineering vault. Cost us 3 crew to hold it." She jerked a thumb toward a cluster of survivors huddled around a glowing console, their faces etched with exhaustion. Torres scanned the group, his wit surfacing in the tension. 3? Hell, that's a win against those squidskins. What's the catch? "They're coming back," Hale replied, her voice flat. "Scouts reported a Krell cruiser inbound, ETA 6 hours. They want the station's relay to broadcast that damn ceasefire propaganda. We blow it, we cut their signal chain, but it'll light us up like a flare." Lear shifted uneasily, his voice a low rumble. "The offer is deception. Accept and humans become vassals. Refuse and they glass worlds." Vasquez nodded, her mind racing. "We rig the relay to overload on their frequency. Turn their broadcast into a beacon for every human fleet in range." Hale's team murmured approval, but Torres held up a hand. "Risky. If it backfires, we fry the whole station, and us with it." They moved to the engineering vault, a cavernous space humming with jury-rigged generators. Hale's engineers cracked the fuel seals while Vasquez and Lear worked the relay controls, splicing in a feedback loop from scavenged Krell tech. Torres stood watch at the access points, rifle trained on the vents. Hours blurred into a frenzy of welds and code. The first tremor hit as they tested the rig, a distant rumble vibrating through the deck plates. "Krell Vanguard," Torres barked over comms. "Drones incoming, breach at Sector 3. Vasquez slammed the panel shut. "Hale, get your people to the pod. We detonate on my mark." The drones swarmed like metallic locusts, lasers carving through the outer hulls. Torres fired in controlled bursts, dropping 2 before a blast wave knocked him back, singeing his suit. He rolled to his feet, cursing, and lobbed a grenade that turned the corridor into a fireball. Lear's claws flew across the console, overriding the drone's signals. It's working, the loops feeding their own commands back. They're turning on each other. But the main cruiser arrived early, its shadow eclipsing Vega's light. A boarding beam locked on, and Krell shock troops poured through the fresh rents in the station's skin. Vasquez triggered the overload manually. Racing for the airlock, the relay screamed, broadcasting a distorted wail that scrambled the Krell comms across the system. Drones spasmed and crashed. Troops clutched their helmets, disoriented. They piled into the pod, Hale's survivors crammed into every corner. Torres sealed the hatch as the first Krell warrior breached the dock, its weapon discharging wildly. Vasquez punched the undock, fuel tanks sloshing full but the station fracturing behind them. Explosions rippled outward, the relay blooming into a silent nova that painted the void in electric blue. The cruiser veered, engines flaring as its systems fried from the feedback, but not before a parting shot grazed their hull, shearing off a stabilizer fin. "We bought time," Vasquez said, steadying the wobble as they accelerated away. "But they've got our scent now." Torres slumped into his seat, a burn mark blackening his shoulder. "Worth it. One less chain for them to forge." Vasquez gripped the armrests as the pod shuddered, the damaged fin throwing them into a lazy spin. Alarms blared from the console, red lights pulsing like wounds across the dim interior. Torres winced, peeling away the charred fabric from his shoulder, but his eyes stayed locked on the nav screen where the Krell pursuit signatures bloomed like angry stars. "Stabilizers at 30%. Hale reported from the makeshift engineering station. Her voice clipped over the hum of failing systems. "We can't outrun them like this. Fuel's holding, but one more hit and we're debris." Vasquez nodded, forcing calm into her tone. "Options, talk to me." Torres leaned forward, ignoring the blood seeping through his bandage. "Asteroid field ahead, the belt's fringes. We weave in, lose them in the rocks. Risky, but they've got mass to them, hard to maneuver." Hale shot him a look. "Risky? Their scanners will pick us up in seconds. We need a decoy, something to draw fire." The pod lurched again, proximity alerts screeching as the first Krell interceptor closed the gap. Vasquez visualized it. Sleek, predatory hulls with weapons that could vaporize a corvette in one volley. They'd hit the relay hard, but the Krell Empire spanned sectors. This was just a skirmish to them. To humans, it was survival. "Decoy it is," Vasquez decided. She punched coordinates into the auxiliary console. "Launch the probe swarm. Program them to scatter with our signature. Torres, plot the weave tight as you can." "Aye." Torres's fingers flew, but doubt flickered in his eyes. The probe swarm was meant for recon, not bait. 12 tiny drones, each carrying a fraction of their engine profile. It might buy minutes, not hours. Hale activated the launch. The pod vibrated as the bays hissed open, expelling the probes into the void. They fanned out, engines flaring to mimic a fleeing pod splitting into multiples. On the main screen, the signatures multiplied, a deceptive flock darting toward the asteroids. The Krell hesitated. Vasquez saw it in the sensor lag, their formation fracturing as targeting systems scrambled. Then pursuit split, half veering toward the decoys. "They're buying it," Hale breathed, a rare smile cracking her fatigue. But the lead interceptor adjusted, locking onto the real pod. A warning klaxon wailed. "Incoming torpedo," Torres barked. "Evasive!" Vasquez yanked the yoke, the pod groaning as it rolled. The asteroid field loomed now, jagged silhouettes against the star field, a graveyard of cosmic rubble. The torpedo streaked past, detonating against a drifting boulder that shattered into a spray of fragments. Shrapnel pinged off their hull like hail. "Too close," Vasquez muttered. She threaded the pod between two tumbling rocks, the spin worsening their drift. Torres fired retros, stabilizing just enough to avoid collision. But the Krell were adapting, their heavier frames bullying through the debris where humans danced on the edge. Another hit rocked them, a grazing beam that fried secondary systems. Lights dimmed. Hale cursed as her console sparked. "Shields down to 15. We lose the field, we're blind." Vasquez's mind raced. The Krell's ceasefire proposal had come weeks ago, a velvet glove over their iron grip. Submit or perish. Humans had answered with sabotage, hitting supply lines and relays like the one they'd just nuked. But out here alone, ingenuity was their only weapon. "Environmental seals," she said suddenly. "Can we vent the cargo bay? Create a debris cloud?" Hale's eyes widened. "That'll mask us, but it'll freeze the bay solid. Any survivors in there?" Torres glanced back. Hale's team from the station, 12 souls crammed in the hold, prepping for the long haul home. No choice, he said grimly. Do it. She hesitated, then nodded. With a keystroke, the bay doors cracked open to vacuum. Atmosphere whooshed out, carrying loose gear and a plume of vapor that billowed into the asteroids. The cloud expanded, scattering sensor returns, turning the pod into a ghost amid the rocks. The pursuing Krell fired blindly, beams carving through stone but missing the mark. One interceptor smashed into a boulder, erupting in a silent fireball that lit the field in orange. Vasquez exhaled, easing the throttle. The spin steadied as they slipped deeper into the maze. We're clear, for now. But Hale's face stayed tight, staring at the feed from the bay. Frost rhymed the cameras, and beyond, the human shapes huddled in suits, alive but enduring the cold. They'll make it, she said more to herself. We all will. Torres clapped Vasquez on the back. One step closer to extinction on our terms. The asteroids whispered past, hiding them from the stars. Vasquez gripped the controls tighter as the asteroid field's shadows deepened. The pod's hull groaning under the strain of micro-adjustments. A new ping echoed from the sensors, faint but insistent. Krell scouts probing the edges like wolves sniffing blood. They're adapting, Torres muttered from the nav station, his fingers dancing over holographic readouts. His usual grin was gone, replaced by a furrowed brow that spoke of too many close calls. That chaff bought us time, but their patterns are shifting. They'll flush us out in minutes. Hale shot him a glance, her cautious nature kicking in as she cross-checked the life support feeds. The bay cams showed the huddled figures, engineers and Marines alike, stamping feet against the encroaching frost, their breaths fogging the suits. One, a wiry tech named Lena, was rigging an improvised heater from scavenged parts, sparks flying in the dim light. We can't afford another evasion burn, Hale said, her voice steady but edged. Fuel's down to 23%, and the cold's biting deeper. Lena's fix will hold, but not forever. Vasquez nodded, her eyes locked on the viewport where jagged rocks loomed like teeth. The plan had been simple. Weave through the belt, link up with the remnant fleet at Outpost Epsilon. But the Krell's ceasefire proposal had been a trap, their diplomacy nothing but a feint to herd humanity into kill zones. Now extinction wasn't just a word. It was the ice creeping into the bay, the failing engines, the endless pursuit. A shudder ran through the pod as debris clipped the flank. Alarms blared, hull breach in Sector 4. Torres cursed, slamming a patch command. Sealed, but we're venting Atmo. Vasquez, we need options now. The captain's mind raced, drawing on old academy drills and forgotten spacer tales. Human grit wasn't about bigger guns. It was scraping victory from scraps. Torres, plot a slingshot trajectory. Use the Big Mama asteroid ahead as a gravity whip. It'll mask our signature. Hale's eyes widened. That's suicide. The field's too dense. One wrong vector and we're paced. Or we're ghosts. Vasquez pushed the throttle forward, the pod surging toward the colossal rock tumbling lazily in the void. It dwarfed them. A mountain of iron and ice scarred by eons. As they closed, the sensors lit up. Krell signatures converging, their beams lancing through the gaps. Torres interfaced the nav AI, sweat beading on his forehead. Locked in. But if we miss the whip, no one's walking away. The pod dove, engines flaring blue against the black. Rocks whipped past, close enough to rattle the frame. In the bay, the humans braced. Lena's heater hummed to life, a defiant glow against the frost. Hale monitored it all, her voice a calm anchor over comms. Hold steady. We're turning the hunt. The slingshot hit like a hammer. Gravity yanked them around the asteroid's curve, velocity spiking as they emerged on the far side. Momentum carrying them into a blind vector the Krell couldn't predict. Beams scorched the rock behind them, but the pod was already gone, slipping into uncharted drifts. Vasquez exhaled, the tension easing a fraction. But the fuel gauge blinked red and a new alert flashed, structural fatigue. The cost was mounting. Torres leaned back, a spark of his wit returning. Humans won, stars, still undefeated. Hale allowed a thin smile. For now, Epsilon's signal is faint, but it's there. We push. The field thinned ahead, stars piercing the gloom like promises. But in the bay, one suit's vitals flatlined. The cold had claimed its toll. Vasquez clenched her jaw. Victory tasted like ash. They accelerated into the unknown, the Krell's roar fading behind. Extinction waited, but so did defiance. The hull groaned under the strain. A low vibration Vasquez felt in her bones as the pod punched through the asteroid field's outer veil. Epsilon's faint beacon pulsed on the nav screen, a lifeline in the void. But the structural alerts were multiplying, microfractures spiderwebbing across the aft compartments. Hale gripped the console, her knuckles white, eyes flicking between readouts. Vasquez, reroute auxiliary power to the shields. We're not outrunning them clean. We need to buy time. Vasquez nodded, her fingers flying over the patched-together interface. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The cabin's recyclers struggling against the heat from overtaxed engines. Torres, slumped in the co-pilot seat with a makeshift bandage around his arm, let out a wry chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. Buying time with what? Our good looks? Last I checked, Krell aren't swayed by charm. He jabbed at the sensor array, pulling up a grainy feed of the pursuers. 3 Krell interceptors, sleek and predatory, weaving through the debris like sharks in a reef. The first interceptor loosed a salvo, energy lances slicing the darkness. One grazed the pod's flank, shearing off a sensor pod in a burst of sparks. Alarms wailed, red lights bathing the interior in bloody hues. Hale barked, evasive. Hard starboard. Vasquez yanked the yoke, the pod bucking as thrusters fired in protest. They skimmed a tumbling boulder close enough to rattle loose panels. But the Krell closed the gap, their formation tightening. In the dim glow of the engineering panel, Vasquez spotted the anomaly. A weak point in the field's density, a narrow chute flanked by spinning rocks the size of HAB modules. It was suicide on paper, too tight for their mass, but humans didn't play by alien physics. Torres, you with me? We're threading the needle. Torres straightened, wincing as he sealed his harness. Born for it, Cap, just don't scratch the paint. Hale's voice cut sharp. That's not a plan. That's a prayer. But she was already compensating, feeding auxiliary thrust vectors to stabilize their roll. The pod dove into the chute, engines screaming. Massive rocks loomed unforgiving, the proximity klaxons a frantic chorus. A fragment clipped the dorsal fin, sending them into a spin. Vasquez fought the controls, muscles burning, while Torres manually overrode the inertial dampeners to shave seconds off the correction. Behind the lead, Krell interceptor hesitated, its sensors no doubt screaming overload. Then it followed, bold and unyielding. The channel narrowed, walls of stone blurring past. Vasquez's heart hammered. One wrong twitch and they'd be pulverized. Now deploy the decoys. Torres slapped the release, hurling fabricated debris chaff laced with false heat signatures. The Krell's beams lit up the chute, vaporizing the ghosts, but the second interceptor piled in, too eager. Collision came without warning. The trailing Krell scraped the wall, its hull crumpling against unyielding rock in a chain reaction that propagated forward. Shrapnel peppered the pod's rear, punching through the weakened bays. An explosion rocked them, cargo venting into space, and with it the last of their spare oxy tanks. Hale's face paled as the life support gauges dipped. We lost the reserves. 2 hours tops if we don't patch it. They burst from the chute, the field opening into clearer void. Epsilon's signal strengthening like a siren's call. But the surviving Krell, 2 now, battered but relentless, emerged roaring, their ceasefire overtures long forgotten in the heat of pursuit. Vasquez wiped blood from a cut on her brow, tasting copper. They want extinction? We'll give them a lesson in human persistence first. Torres grinned fiercely, plotting intercept courses. Aye. Let's show these squid what grit looks like. The pod surged forward, shields flickering, every weld a testament to their refusal to yield. Vasquez gripped the armrest as the Endurance, now their commandeered vessel after linking with Epsilon's remnants, shuddered through the asteroid field's thinning edge, the Krell fighters closing like shadows in the rear scanners. Torres's fingers danced over the console, rerouting power from non-essentials. Lights dimmed to a faint red glow, leaving Hale's face ghostly in the emergency strips. Shields at 20%, Torres barked, his voice steady despite the strain. Those bastards are firing plasma lances. If one hits clean, we're vapor. Hale leaned forward, eyes locked on the oxy readout ticking downward like a fuse. 2 hours had shrunk to 90 minutes, the air already tasting thinner, metallic. She jabbed a finger at the schematic. We can't outrun them to Epsilon. Not with this hole-in-the-hull venting atmosphere. Vasquez, your call, evade or engage. Vasquez scanned the void ahead. Epsilon's faint blue arc growing larger. A promise of resupply if they could just reach it. The Krell proposal had come mid-battle hours ago. A terse transmission flickering across channels. Ceasefire. Negotiate terms. Mutual survival. It was almost polite. Their bioluminescent script pulsing with feigned reason. Hale had laughed, a bitter bark, and keyed the response himself. Your extinction, no terms. Now, as the station's defenses synced with their systems, she felt the weight of that defiance settle like dust after a blast. Engage, Vasquez said, the word heavy but final. Torres, swing us port. Hale, get that patch kit prepped. We're sealing this breach the hard way. The ship banked sharply, inertial dampeners whining as G-forces pressed them into seats. A plasma lance streaked past close enough to rattle the bulkheads, its heat blooming against the hull sensors. Torres whooped, a grim sound. Missed us by a meter. Coming around for another pass, alarms blared, cutting her off. Hale cursed, scrambling from her station to the engineering panel. Secondary breach! Cargo bays cracked open wider. We're losing more than oxy now, tools, sealant, everything. Vasquez unstrapped, joining her in the narrow corridor beyond the bridge. The ship groaned as another lance grazed the shields. Sparks flying from overloaded circuits. She yanked open the access hatch, the vacuum seal hissing in protest. Cold rushed in, frosting her gloves, but the breach was small, a jagged tear where shrapnel from an earlier hit had widened. Hale thrust a makeshift patch forward. Hull foam mixed with emergency tape, crude but human. Hold it steady, she ordered, her cautious nature flipping to laser focus. She sprayed the foam, the acrid chemical bite filling the air, but the tear was fighting back, edges curling under pressure. A jolt rocked the Endurance, Torres's voice crackling over the intercom. Direct hit on the engines. We're limping. Krell 1's lining up the kill shot. Vasquez braced against the wall, sweat beading despite the chill. The foam wasn't holding. Atmosphere whistled out in a thin stream, carrying flecks of ice. 90 minutes down to an hour. They were blind to the stars now, the field debris scattering light into confusion. Think, damn it, Hale muttered, rummaging in the scattered debris from the cargo vent. Her hand closed on a loose conduit rod, half melted from the earlier blast. Eyes lighting with that spark of ingenuity humans prided themselves on, she stripped the insulation with her teeth. Vasquez, reroute auxiliary power here. We jury-rig a magnetic seal. Use the rod as an electromagnet to clamp the hull plates. Vasquez nodded, no time for doubt, fingers flying to splice the lines. Power hummed through the rod, the makeshift coil glowing as it pulled metal toward metal. The tier buckled, then sealed with a resonant thud, the whistle dying to silence. Air pressure stabilized, gauges flickering back to green for now. Back on the bridge, Torres had the ship in a desperate spiral, dodging the first Krell fighter. They're splitting, flanking us, she yelled. Vasquez slid into her seat, plotting the intercept. Epsilon loomed closer, its orbital docks a faint gleam. But the Krell were relentless. Their biology adapted to vacuum chases that would kill humans in minutes. One fighter dove low, lancing fire across their flank. Shields collapsed in a shower of alerts. The Endurance listed, engines coughing. Hale strapped in, pale but resolute. We bought time, but not enough. They're herding us toward that debris cluster, want to finish us slow. Torres grinned, that witty edge cutting through fear. Not today. Vasquez armed the decoys. Let's give them a human welcome. She punched the sequence, launching sensor ghosts, dummy signals mimicking the ship's signature. The Krell hesitated, plasma lances firing wild into the void. Seizing the gap, Torres gunned the thrusters, the Endurance surging toward Epsilon's shadow. But the second fighter adapted, closing fast, its roar a psychic thrum in their implants. Alien rage. Unyielding. A final lance pierced the outer hull, shearing a stabilizer. The ship spun, controls fighting back. Oxygen dipping again as seals strained. Hale grabbed Vasquez's arm. Brace, impact in 10. They hurtled into Epsilon's outer ring, debris pinging like hail, the Krell trailing in pursuit. Torres wrestled the yoke, sweat slicked. Holding, just. Vasquez watched the scanners, the alien signatures merging for a killing blow. Not extinction, not yet. The Endurance broke atmosphere, docking clamps extending like desperate hands, but the Krell fired one last volley, rocking the frame. Alarms wailed as they clamped in, safe for a breath. Hale exhaled, voice raw. We made it, but the ship's done. They'll board if we don't. Explosions lit the void outside, Epsilon's defenses awakening. Human allies finally in range. The Krell veered, caught in the crossfire. Torres slumped, grinning through exhaustion. Grit pays off. Vasquez wiped blood from her split lip, the metallic tang sharp on her tongue as she scanned the docking bay's flickering readouts. The Endurance groaned against the clamps, hull plates buckling under the strain, but they were in. Epsilon Station's grav field holding them steady while the void outside erupted in laser fire. Hale's hand lingered on her shoulder, a rare anchor in the chaos, her eyes fixed on the forward view screen where human interceptors swarmed like angry hornets, shredding the Krell vanguard. "Status on the fleet," Torres called from the pilot station, his voice hoarse but steady, fingers already plotting micro-jumps to evade any stragglers. "They're scattering," Hale replied, pulling up tactical overlays. "Our reinforcements hit them hard. 3 Krell cruisers down, but they've got reinforcements inbound from the outer belt. We bought time, not victory." Vasquez nodded, her mind racing through the debris field reports. The Krell's proposal had come mid-battle, a holographic envoy droning about mutual survival, their bioluminescent script pulsing with feigned reason. She'd laughed a bitter bark and keyed the response, "No terms. Your extinction." Now, as the station's defenses synced with their systems, she felt the weight of that defiance settle like dust after a blast. Alarms blared anew, proximity alerts. A Krell boarding pod had latched onto the Endurance's underbelly, undetected in the frenzy. "They're inside," Vasquez snapped, grabbing a pulse rifle from the bulkhead rack. "Section C, engineering access." Hale was already moving, Torres barking overrides to seal bulkheads. "I'll hold the bridge." "Go, make it quick." The corridor to engineering twisted like a vein, emergency lights strobing red as they sprinted. Sparks showered from a ruptured conduit, and Vasquez ducked, firing a burst at the first Krell drone that scuttled from a vent, its carapace splintering in a spray of ichor. Hale covered her flank, his shots precise, each one a testament to the drills they'd run 100 times in quieter orbits. "They're adapting," he grunted, reloading on the fly. That ceasefire was a feint, buying time to deploy these. A larger Krell warrior burst through a hatch, its tentacles whipping with plasma barbs. It lunged at Vasquez, forcing her back against a coolant pipe that hissed steam. She rolled, the barb grazing her arm, searing fabric and skin. Hale charged, slamming his rifle butt into the creature's sensory cluster, buying her a shot. She fired point blank, the round punching through its core. It slumped, twitching, but more shadows stirred in the vents. They reached engineering, the room a haze of acrid smoke from the earlier volley damage. Torres's voice crackled over comms. "Pods venting atmosphere. You've got minutes before they flood the bay." Vasquez eyed the core reactor, its gauges dipping red. An idea sparked, born of desperation and the junkyard ingenuity that had kept them alive through a dozen skirmishes. "The exhaust vents. Reroute power to overload them. It'll backflush the pod, cook anything inside." Hale's eyes narrowed, calculating. Risky. Could fry our own systems. Better than letting them breach the station. She was already at the console, fingers flying over patched wiring, bypassing safeties with a makeshift shunt from spare conduits. Hale stood guard, picking off 2 more drones that skittered in, their chittering silenced by his fire. The reactor hummed, building pressure. Alarms wailed as the overload initiated. A controlled explosion funneled back through the docking tube. The deck shuddered, and over the comms, Torres whooped, "Direct hit!" Pod slagged, Krell signatures flatlining. They staggered back to the bridge as Epsilon's fleet pressed the advantage, human ships weaving through the ring's debris like predators closing on wounded prey. The Krell transmission cut out mid-plea, their formation crumbling under coordinated strikes. Hale watched the screens, his face etched with the cost. The Endurance crippled, crew down to skeletons, and alliances strained by the blood they'd spilled. Vasquez leaned against the console, bandaging her arm with shaking hands. "They proposed peace. We chose this." Hale met her gaze, unyielding. "And we'll finish it." In the void, the last Krell ship burned, a silent testament to human resolve. Extinction delivered.